This government isn't doing anything to bring down inflation. This government is stoking inflation. First, we had above-inflation pay rises for the unions. Then, we had a budget which the OBR said would increase inflation.
Angela Rayner got absolutely demolished in the Parliament by Alex Burghart.
His party couldn't even get the money out the door for farmers, failing to spend over 300 million on farming budgets. The farmers know they ruined it for them, and that's why we're in government and they're not.
Shouting and throwing tantrums didn't work out for Angela the way she wanted it to.
This government is doing it to the British people. High tax, high inflation, low growth, low reform. There's a word for that, Mr. Speaker. It's Starmerism.
Alex Burghart exposed the government's sinister plan, and there was nothing Angela Rayner's appalling statements could do about it.
What is the government doing to bring down inflation?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think it's astonishing that, and first of all, can I welcome the Right Honourable Member to his place. And many people might not know, Mr. Speaker, but the Honourable Member was the Minister for Growth when under Liz Truss.
Angela Rayner struggled to answer a simple question about inflation and resorted to her usual disgusting tactics.
This government is stoking inflation. First, we had above-inflation pay rises for the unions. Then, we had a budget which the OBR said would increase inflation.
Order. Sorry. Right, I'm going to hear the question. I suggest we all hear it together, then our constituents can understand the answer as well as the question. Alex Burke.
Her attempt to play the blame game backfired horribly because Alex came prepared to humiliate them.
Does the Right Honourable Lady agree that this government's decisions mean higher inflation for working people?
Mr. Speaker, I'll ask the Honourable Gentleman, 11.1% or 3%?
We've already talked about Ukraine, Mr. Speaker. It was Ukraine and COVID that drove up inflation. This government is doing it to the British people.
Labour has brought this disaster on the British people on purpose. Angela can't deny it, and Starmer's terrified.
High tax, high inflation, low growth, low reform. There's a word for that, Mr. Speaker. It's Starmerism. Yesterday, like many honourable members on this side of the House, I spoke to farmers from across the United Kingdom. Some of them families who farmed their land for centuries, elderly men in tears, children worried about their parents, all of them worried that their way of life is about to be destroyed. What would the Right Honourable Lady like to say to them?
Starmerism has ruined this country with the most idiotic policies imaginable, especially for the farmers.
Mr. Speaker, we are absolutely committed to our British farmers, and that's why we've committed £5 billion to the farming budget over the next 2 years. That's the largest ever amount for sustainable food production in the UK, and it's alongside £60 million, Mr. Speaker, to support those affected by extreme wet weather, and over £200 million to tackle disease outbreaks. His party couldn't even get the money out the door for farmers, failing to spend over £300 million.
Angela proves that Labour is not only out of touch with reality, they're delusional and tone deaf to think that they're helping farmers.
Perhaps the Right Honourable Lady thinks that everyone came to London yesterday to thank the government. Let's look at the facts. A typical mid-sized 360-acre family farm in the constituency of my right honourable friend for Thirsk and Moulton. They've spoken to their accountant. Their new liability because of this government is £500,000. That's 12 years' worth of profit. When this generation passes away, that farm will become totally unviable, and it's just one of thousands and thousands of similar farms.
The furious farmers that are striking should be proof enough that nobody wants this incompetent lot around anymore.
It's clear the government hasn't got its facts right. The Central Association for Agricultural Valuers, the real experts in this field, say so. The NFU says so. They're shortly to publish a report showing that 75% of all commercial farms will fall above the threshold. If the government isn't If the government isn't going to reverse this terrible policy, will the Right Honourable Lady at least commit that there will be no further increases to inheritance tax and no further reductions to agricultural property relief or business property relief in this Parliament?
Angela and the Labour Party have no clue that they're talking about, and they're getting rightfully blasted for it.
And pay no tax on land passed on valued at £1 million. Couples can pass on £3 million, Mr. Speaker, tax-free, and those above the thresholds will pay only half the normal rate and can pay over 10 years interest-free.
This is just another part of the budget that's unravelling, Mr. Speaker. Everyone here and all the farmers at home will have heard there was no guarantee there. We know what that means. They're coming back for more.
Starmer and his cronies, especially Angela Rayner, are not done making your life miserable yet. They'll be back for more. This is nothing new. Being humiliated in the Parliament is usual for Angela Rayner.
What is the Deputy Prime Minister's definition of working people?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, first of all, let me start by welcoming the honourable gentleman to his new place. Today is our first exchange, Mr. Speaker, since he pushed for a July general election. And if his own side hasn't offered him a peerage, I certainly would have. And Mr. Speaker, the definition of working people are the people that the Tory party have failed for the last 14 years.
Almost immediately, Angela Rayner gets down to her usual tactics of shamelessly trying to avoid the question. It shouldn't be that hard for her to define a working person, especially since Starmer and his gang won the election by making a dozen false promises to them. To make matters worse, she starts playing the blame game and talking nonsense about the previous government. That's what Angela does when she has no idea what she's talking about, which happens way more often than you'd think.
Well, the Deputy Prime Minister stood on a manifesto promising not to raise taxes on working people. It now appears she can't even define who working people are. So I'll give her another go. There are 5 million small business owners in this country. Are they working people?
Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner, Rachel Reeves and the rest of the Labour's cronies promised not to raise taxes on the working class Brits. That turned out to be a total lie once they won the election and got into government. Are they simply incompetent, or did they maliciously lie on purpose to gain support? The British public has been betrayed by their disgusting and shameless dishonesty, and no wonder people are fed up. There's been a furious and swift backlash against their nonsense.
Well, I think the whole House will have heard the Deputy Prime Minister disregard 5 million hard-working small business owners. These are the publicans, the shopkeepers, the family running a local cafe. None of those count as working people to her.
She continues to hide behind the working people that she can't even define. How much more tone deaf can this government get? Angela had the audacity to stand in the House of Commons and disregard the millions of people whom her party is clobbering left and right. People's lives have been made miserable by this lot. Small businesses are suffering, and those of us who have jobs are facing pay cuts and potential layoffs. In what stupid world does any of this help the British public? Angela takes her delusional thinking a step further as she doubles down and refuses to give any straight answers.
The independent IFS have given their view on this. They say that raising employer national insurance is a tax on working people. Even the Chancellor said that raising employer national insurance was a jobs tax that will make each new recruit more expensive and increase the cost to business. So does she agree with the IFS and her own Chancellor?
How pathetic is it when Labour isn't even on the same page on their own policies? It only goes to show the internal crisis that Labour is in. They're disunited and struggling to keep themselves together. What's worse is that Angela can't even agree with Rachel Reeves and the countless independent institutions that are calling their policies out to be absolute bonkers. The hike in national insurance will ruin the job market, and we're only beginning to see the consequences of this nonsensical policy.
We're pro-business, pro-worker and getting on with fixing the mess that they left behind.
So I think we can take it from that answer that the Deputy Prime Minister doesn't agree with the IFS, and I suppose it shouldn't come as a surprise that she doesn't agree with her Chancellor, but does she agree with this, and I quote, "Working people will pay when employers pass on the hike in national insurance." Mr. Speaker, these are her words. So does she at least agree with herself?
She has the audacity to say that they're pro-business when everything they've done so far has harmed our businesses. No matter how hard she tries to evade the question, she gets caught each time. Angela has a reputation of going around spouting whatever nonsense that comes to her mind without any filter. That habit gets her humiliated each time, especially now as own past statement is being used against her. Will she have the common sense to at least be honest with the public and agree with her own words?
That he put on working people, the crashing of the economy and the disaster that he left behind.
Well, she mentions her policy. Let's be clear, it's a £5 billion hit to the British economy, and that's her own assessment. Mr. Speaker, I think that following these answers, there will be millions of working people now even more worried about the tax rises coming their way in next week's budget.
Who does Angela Rayner think that she's fooling? It's certainly not the public, and at the end of the day, she only exposed herself. Her repeated attempts to deflect and shift the blame on the Tories are completely nullified. What's worse is that the workers' rights bill that Angela Rayner so proudly brags about is nothing to be proud of. It's another horrible policy in Labour's long list of blunders. This specific one will cost us another £5 billion. We're being governed by amateurs who have no idea what they're on about. No wonder people are terrified of whatever taxes and job insecurities that will come next. When she's not getting demolished in the Parliament, Angela Rayner is making media rounds and making an even bigger fool of herself on live TV.
She had quite a busy day because, of course, fell into her lap, unfortunately, the need to sort of explain what the government was doing about Syria, because it was only yesterday that it finally looked as if Assad was finished. Until then, there was a sort of slight hope that he might hang on, but he's gone. So she had to explain that. Then she had to explain the housing crisis and what's going on in terms of her plans to turn the entire country into a council estate.
This week has been rather eventful for both global and domestic politics. A lot has happened and it all fell onto our lovely Angela Rayner to explain to the British public. Naturally, she herself had no idea about what she was talking about and was only spouting whatever nonsense that Labour scripted for her. What's sad about the whole situation is that even their scripted answers are an incoherent mess. Angela is struggling to even do her job as the housing secretary, and it's painfully obvious.
So there's an awkward reality there. Can you get someone else to build 1.5 million homes in double quick time? I doubt it. But this is a discussion about the quality of Labour's front bench, and this is one of the luminaries of Labour's front bench. This is the Deputy Prime Minister, the second most powerful person in all of this country. She's also the Housing Secretary, very, very important ministerial job.
The disconnect between Labour and reality is concerning. In fact, they're so out of touch and delusional that they don't seem to be living in the same Britain that we do. While Angela Rayner trots around receiving freebies and being at the centre of countless scandals, our nation is facing a housing crisis. The state of our leaders is simply pathetic, to put it kindly. The best and the brightest of the Labour Party are behaving like toddlers who don't have the slightest clue about what's going on.
What's the latest information that the government has? Can you confirm that Assad is gone?
Well, we don't know. The situation on the ground is fast moving at the moment. If the Assad regime has fallen, then we welcome that news. What we want to see is a political solution along the lines of what the UN resolution is, and we're working with our allies.
Are you sure, though, if this rebel group does take charge, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, they have connections and roots with groups like Al-Qaeda. Are you sure as a government they'd be a better option than the Assad regime?
Well, again, working with allies on the UN resolution, we've got to have...
A Syrian dictator being overthrown is huge news that will change how the global landscape will look like in a few years. The concerning news is that he was overthrown by a rebel group, and we have no idea if they will be any better than Assad. And how does Angela Rayner explain the updates like a PR-trained robot who just keeps repeating the same thing over and over again, hoping that it'd eventually make sense?
bloody dar. I mean, what the hell is that all about? All she's doing there, she's being drilled by the media advisors, the press office. Right, just say something about the UN resolution, and we're sticking to that, and we're working with allies. Very difficult, fast-moving situation. In other words, she didn't have the first clue what she was talking about.
You could replace Angela Rayner with Starmer or just a broken record and it wouldn't make a difference. Instead of keeping us up to date on the actual realities of the matter, she's just touting out what her media officials have told her to. Is this our Deputy Prime Minister who hopes to become the leader of the Labour Party one day? She can't even speak for herself, and what's worse is that she doesn't have the slightest clue about the entire matter. Maybe the next freebie she should receive is a book on global politics. Shortly after that interview, she went on to make a fool out of herself yet again.
The 2.5 million immigrants that are in Rachel V's budget figures going to turn up. Where are they going to live?
Well, there's plenty of housing in the UK, but the houses, especially social
hang on. You can't, on the one hand, say we've got to build this 1.5 million houses and then say there's plenty of housing already.
There is plenty of housing, Trevor, already, but there's not enough for the people that desperately need it. So the homes, especially under our affordable homes programme, which is social and affordable housing, they will be there for people who desperately need them.
We have a housing secretary who is a bumbling idiot with no clue about her own policies. How embarrassing is it that she got caught making a hypocritical U-turn on live TV? Naturally, she failed to defend herself and only exposed how Labour has no plan on how to fix the housing crisis. Even more concerning is the fact that Labour has made this crisis much worse with their open borders, immigrant-loving approach.
So, there are plenty of homes, she says, but we have a housing crisis. Plenty of houses, plenty of homes in this country, but we have a housing shortage. Which is it, Angela? You're going to have to make your mind up. Do we have a housing shortage, or do we have too many houses? That's what you said. You said we have plenty of houses, but we've got a housing shortage. Which is it? Don't you know?
There's plenty of homes, but at the same time we're suffering a housing crisis. That statement would only make sense in Angela and Labour's deluded fantasy world. Unfortunately for them, the Brits are not buying any of this nonsense. People are angry and they're demanding accountability. Angela better make up her mind soon and get her act right, or she might be out of a job. For now, there's only two possible explanations for what's happening, and neither of them are a good look for her.
Well, I'm going to give her a little slack here. The best hope we've got here is we have a woman who's hopelessly inarticulate and cannot explain, satisfactorily exactly what this house building programme is all about. It's either that or she just doesn't really have a plan at all.
It just reflects poorly on Britain that this is the state of our politicians. At best, our Deputy Prime Minister has abysmal speaking skills and can't explain things for the life of her. And at worst, she's simply painfully incompetent. Which one do you think is more likely? Either way, it's completely unacceptable and the public deserves honesty. At this rate, either we'll get proper details as to what Labour's plan is, assuming they even have a plan, or this government will be thrown out the window.
But she was a bit confused, wasn't she? She said, one, we've got plenty of houses. Yeah. Two, we haven't got enough houses. Three, we're going to be housing loads of migrants. Four, we're also going to be giving affordable housing to lots of people indigenous from this country.
Yeah, honestly, it's a disgrace, not only that Angela Rayner is anywhere near government, but yeah, that's quite to one side.
That is also ridiculous.
It is, but the very fact that she's able to go out there and try to parrot these lines and it be made really obvious by the interviewer. Hang on, didn't you just say this? Yes, right. But.
Right.
The inconsistencies at the heart of Labour's policies when it comes to things like housing and immigration are clear for all to see, but they're just going to double down on this.
To call it a disgrace is an understatement. Labour has not only ruined their own reputation, they've made our entire nation look clueless in front of the entire world. Seriously, who would take these people seriously? In a single interview, Angela Rayner managed to give 3 different contradictory statements. It'd be impressive if it weren't so concerning. At this point, are they doing it on purpose?
They're just going to push ahead with it, and they're just going to imagine, because as we said earlier, they believe that we're stupid, and that they just do it for long enough, we'll forget about it.
Is it now a sort of government by lie? I don't think I've ever seen a government who are quite so disingenuous about the truth.
Yeah, at least the Tories were honest that everything was on fire.
Yeah.
Give them
I don't sit here to defend the Tories.
No.
I don't defend them. We were very critical of them when they were in. We were very critical of Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. But at the end of the day, they didn't just barefaced lie to the public, which is what Labour seems to be doing.
Starmer and his gang actually believe that we're stupid and they're going to just keep doing whatever they want with blatant disregard for our well-being. They're tone deaf and they're proud of it. This is one of the many differences between the Tories and Labour. Sure, the Tories had their fair share of bad policies and blunders, but at least they were honest about it. They didn't pretend to be righteous while shamelessly lying to our very faces.
There were plenty of people, and at some stations, saying actually, what are the details about? They're not really being very forthcoming. They seem, the figures don't seem to quite match up. We're not being given very much detail. The alarm bells were being sounded that it was simply a case of Labour already knew they'd won the election, so didn't really have to be too honest with people. Now they're in, and that is, I think, bearing out. And we see this, in the very first budget, that everything is actually ripped up and thrown up in the air and gone, well, actually, we've got to find even more money that we magically didn't
disaster,
have.
isn't it?
It has.
We should have seen this coming from the very start. What Starmer and Angela Rayner were promising seemed too good to be true, but we gave them the benefit of the doubt and now we're suffering for it. During the elections, many people pointed out that Labour hasn't provided any details or a proper plan for any of their promises. So, are we really surprised now that they ended up breaking all of their promises? It's not just the domestic policies that are abysmal, we're in a decline on the global level too.
And we are insulated from what's happening in Europe, partly because of our political system, partly because we're not in the euro, although of course that could have very easily happened. But this idea that just because we're not quite collapsing at the same rate as them.
The British pound is stable for now as compared to the European euro. However, that's only because the euro has been declining at a much higher pace than us. Of course, we'd look better compared to the struggling euro. The real comparison lies with the dollar, which is doing much better. The rate at which Labour is going, this nation is about to see some very harsh days. Naturally, the credit and the blame for that will fall on Angela Rayner, Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, and the generally incompetent Labour.
It just means that the stagnation's going to go on even longer. We can't get rid of this government right now unless his own party decide they want to get rid of Keir Starmer, which they're not going to do because they understand how bad things are and what a can of worms that would open. They've seen what happened when the Tories did that, and that can really ruin your time in government. So we're stuck with these people for 4.5 years.
I mean, I still think that something will dislodge him, and I may be wrong about that, and I take your point that, they might prefer the devil they know as far as the Labour Party is concerned, but I feel sort of in my bones that something horrible is going to happen.
Are we stuck with this horrible government for the rest of the term, or is there hope? If it is left up to the Labour Party, they'd never let go of their crushing majority in the Parliament, and replacing Starmer is out of the question. Angela Rayner, however, is a completely different story altogether. Rumours are flying around that Labour is already looking to get rid of Rachel Reeves, and it might not be long before Angela Rayner gets the same treatment. She must take responsibility for her nonsensical statements, her disgusting remarks, and generally appalling behaviour with all the scandals. Holding these people accountable is something you can help out by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.